the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL wire site covering the Arizona Cardinals, of course. And it is a solo show this week as the Arizona Cardinals play their second preseason game Saturday night, 5 p.m. at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. They will be hosting the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs, and it is just an exhibition course, but it will provide a pretty good test of what the Cardinals have to do. This is episode 452. In this episode, I will talk about kind of the players I'm watching for, and a little bit more. We'll keep this one pretty short. So the Cardinals have their matchup coming up, and we don't know exactly how much the starters will be, but we kind of get a feel of who we will not see. Okay? Last week, there were 5 key players who did not play. I would say these are the 5 players we will not see in the preseason. Left tackle DJ Humphries, running back James Conner, receiver Hollywood Brown, linebacker Kaiser White, and also safety Budda Baker. I would be surprised if any of those play. Obviously, there were players who were injured, who were not in the lineup either. Kyler Murray's still out. B.J. Ojulari, he's back off of PUP. Jonathan Gannon made it sound like earlier in the week that he's probably not going to play this week. Yeah, there's some things that he needed to show in practice before they give him some game reps. I think they're kind of slow rolling him to make sure that he's healthy for the season. I think it's one of two things. Hopefully it's not the bad one. They haven't seen enough from him, and they're disappointed, and so they're trying to slow roll him to be ready, or they expect him to do good things, and so they're just protecting him. I hope it's the protection one. I do. Zach Ertz is off of PUP. Don't expect him to play. Don't expect him to play in the preseason at all. He was just cleared to practice, but that doesn't mean he's in game shape. So they've been ramping him up. There's no way he's playing this week. And honestly, there's little chance he plays next week as well against that's the preseason finale. That's where the young players and the backups, the guys battling for the back end of the roster, practice squad spots. So that's the game for those players. He'll probably see some practice reps in the 2 joint practices against the Vikings. But the plan is to have him ready for the first game of the regular season, and that's how it should be. He has played enough football that he doesn't need to acclimate too much. It's running around. It's doing things that he needs to do. Don't need to have him have a setback or get a different injury before then. Players I do expect to see. Also, Cameron Thomas. Of course, that Jonathan Gannon wouldn't talk about what the injury is, but said he's suffering a residual effect of the game last week. He hasn't practiced this week. I would expect him to sit out as well, but we'll see if Myjai Sanders is back, because the returners will help give playing time there for those outside linebackers. Zaven Collins, Dennis Gardeck, and my guess is that most of the starters will get a little more work than they did in the preseason opener. Colt McCoy played the 1 series. The other offensive starters played 2 series, and then the defense played 7 snaps, basic defense, and then they moved to the backups. I would expect to see playing time increase, maybe a quarter, I'd think probably. I don't know if that means McCoy will be out the whole time. I think we'll probably see McCoy for a couple of series, and then get Clayton Tune again some work behind the ones, just to kind of get some feel for that, so he gets to play with the better players. And defensively, I'd kind of expect the same thing. They played 2 short series last week. probably upward to a quarter, and then the rest of the way will kind of go how it went last week. This is going to be a tough game, obviously. Obviously, it's going to be a tough game for the Cardinals. The Chiefs are expecting to play their starters about a half, and so if the Cardinals don't match that, so say the Cardinals play their starters about, which would be roughly the natural progression, because they play like 2 series last week, they're not going to jump all the way to playing a half. I would expect them to probably play about a quarter, get some good work in the joint practices, and then not play at all in the preseason finale. That's how I would expect that to go. What that does, that gives the Cardinals an extra challenge with their backups against the starters of the Chiefs, minus Patrick Mahomes. I expect Mahomes to play very little. I expect him to play, maybe gets in the quarter. But after that, it's going to be the backups against the Chiefs starters for the rest of the first half. If they can hang with them, I'm not again, the preseason results don't matter. The result of the game matters minimally. What matters is to see how players compete, obviously. How players compete and how they look against players of the same caliber or likewise better players, or players they are obviously better than. Which, it was a shame that Marlon Mack got hurt, because that's a scenario where he was going to be going against the backups and the third stringers, and as a former starter and a pretty good NFL back, it would have been able to showcase him. This week, another guy we can expect to see is Keontae Ingram. When they released Stevie Scott, the USFL running back, I think what that was, it wasn't necessarily because they expect James Conner to play. I think it's because they got healthier. And so I'm hoping that we could see Keontae Ingram in the game along with Corey Clement to kind of start things off and to go from there. But, coming to next on the Raise Up Series podcast, the best of our Cardinals Talk on the Web, I want to talk about the players specifically that I want to see kind of step up. What players I want to see moving forward, with what things I want to see coming on next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best of Cardinals Talk on the Web, talking about players that we want to see. Now, last week there were a number of things I wanted to see, and I got most of them. Colt McCoy looked smooth out there. It was the offense was not overwhelming, but I did like the fact that they moved the sticks twice. The offense looked pretty traditional. He looked comfortable. They weren't doing much. That was what I wanted to see. He got out of there healthy, because I expect him to be the starter. And I think Colt McCoy in the lineup is the safest bet to weather the time that Kyler Murray is not on the field. I know people I know what we know what McCoy is a ceiling, but and I know that people want to see Clayton Tune playing. This team wants to, unless Tune is significantly better than McCoy, you've got to, or even playing at the same level, you can't just throw Tune out there when he's not going to be the starter moving forward. That's a different scenario. That's a different scenario than what you do with a rookie quarterback who you know is going to be your starter, where you take your lumps. There's no need to take the lumps. They're just trying to survive till Kyler's gets back. I kind of want to see if the same from Colt. I want to see the offense. I would love, if I had to pick something, I would love to see the starting offense score points, and I'd love to see the starting defense stop the Chiefs once or twice while Mahomes is in the game. If I had to pick a goal for the starters, one is don't be down 2 scores when the Chiefs starters come out or when Mahomes comes out. Show a level of competence and competition. I'm not saying they need to look good. I just want them to not look terrible. I'm going to continue to watch on the offensive line Yelda Froholt, because eyes open, he looked good. I want to see if that could continue, and maybe keep an eye on left guard Elijah Wilkinson to hope that he does not have a follow-up performance. He was less than great last week against the Broncos. Trey McBride hopefully gets in the lineup, and if Trey McBride is in the lineup, he's a player I want to see show out a little bit, because from what we saw last week, it would appear that even in the passing game, the running backs and the tight ends will have an opportunity to produce. And if McBride is out there, he should show some promise. Because the tight end group that they threw out there last week, it was Jeff Swayman and a bunch of guys who haven't really played in the NFL, period. That's kind of how it's been. We know what Corey Clement is. I want, if Keontae Ingram's playing, I want to see him. I want to see what he does. And on the offensive line, moving back farther into the depth chart, watch Josh Jones. I didn't think Josh Jones had a particularly great game. He had the one penalty a couple times. As Kelvin Beachum played left tackle with the starters, I was unsure if it was kind of showcasing him or if it's actually kind of getting him ready to give him the reps at left tackle, since he's only had that a little bit. Or if I wonder if they're, in the sake of competition, that they're going to start Josh Jones at left tackle instead of Beachum and kind of play the opposite role. I'm interested in seeing how that happens. Defensively, well, it's still on the offensive side of the ball. Let's see what we can get out of, if Michael Wilson can do more than two, short catches. Now, he did nicely running the route past the sticks, getting the ball caught and picking up a third down catch to move the chains. It'd be nice to see him make a play or two as well. On the defensive side of the ball, Isaiah Simmons, I'm paying attention to Isaiah Simmons, especially early in the game. How does he get used against that defense? Now, last year Simmons got he was abused by Travis Kelce in the season opener against the Chiefs in the regular season, and it kind of spiraled from there. He wasn't prepared. He's not playing in the slot this year, and I wonder, with Jalen Thompson playing in the slot, if he will be the one that is asked to do more against Kelce, how he does, or if they use Simmons on the back end to sort of protect against that, using as a safety, kind of the safety valve there at the back of the defense. I want some pass rush production. Zaven Collins showed some pop in his playing time last week. I want to see more of that. I don't need to see anything from Dennis Gardeck, because I don't ultimately think he's going to be being part of the playing rotation. But I do want to see Myjai Sanders play, and I want him to do something. I am going to keep an eye on the special team reps for Vic Dimukeje, because a guy that probably looks like he's not quite going to make the numbers on the roster, he played heavily on special teams. And that suggests he might already have a place on the roster, depending on what Coach Rogers says. And the effort there. The cornerback position is one to watch as well. Keitrell Clark and Christian Matthew, both things. Can one of them move ahead of the other? And how much will Antonio Hamilton play? That Seth and I talked about on the show the other day about how his playing time was kind of odd, because he's listed at first on the depth chart, but he played deep into the game, which usually means you're on the bubble showcasing. It's his salary is fully guaranteed, which is an interesting addition to the puzzle. Kind of want to see that. There. Who's going to be the fourth safety? Okay, we know who the three are. Budda Baker, Jalen Thompson, Isaiah Simmons. Last week was Juju Hughes that came in, and then Andre Chachere. Chachere also got playing time. They signed Sean Chandler, suggesting that somebody got hurt. I don't know if it's one of their guys like Juju Hughes, or if it was Chachere who special teams. Hughes didn't play much on special teams, which suggests I don't know if that means that he's less likely to make the roster, because you're going to want your fourth safety or your fourth and fifth cornerback to be pretty good contributors to special teams. I'm going to watch the punting battle again. I know, that's boring. But also watch the holding, because on Prater's missed field goal, Cooney was the holder. I didn't catch on was busy doing stuff for reporting, and so I didn't see who held for Prater's make. But I know Hawk had a punt at the beginning of the game that he wished he'd had it back. It ended up getting into the end zone. It would have been better to have that go another way. But yeah, that's kind of how that went. So yeah, that's kind of that. There's always players to watch on both sides of the ball, and the preseason is less about the overall football product and more about the individual evaluations, I guess. But like Jonathan Gannon, like Nick Rawlis, and like Drew Petzing, you want to see these players compete. We talked about how important the win was last week. Not for the wins and losses, but to be able to kind of build things early. It kind of builds a little momentum. I don't know if they're going to win, but I will say this. As a guy that also writes about sports betting, there's only one way to bet the preseason, in my opinion. Only one. You bet the underdog on the money line. Go for the odds, because let's be honest. You don't want to bet a heavy favor on the money line to begin with, because the Chiefs, they're like minus 300 or something like that. And this game, I haven't checked the most recent odds. That's not worth playing. And because the second half of preseason games, it's all backups and guys that are for the roster. These are players who will not be difference makers in the NFL regular season. When you look at trends and play, it's like the teams look vastly different than what they will be in the regular season, and you try to make educated predictions and projections. So I ignore the spread completely. I personally would probably avoid the total, but if I'm betting the preseason, I'm just picking a few games or all the games and just hitting the money line underdog, which would be, in this case, the Cardinals. I think they were at plus 260. I think it's plus 240, but they are once again the heaviest, the largest underdog of the week in the preseason, which is interesting considering that they won last week. It's kind of the perception moving forward, but yeah, there's not much else to say. So, what are the keys for? Let's talk about that next. Coming up, that's on the Rise of Seabird podcast, the Cardinals talk on the web. What are the keys to this game? We'll talk keys in the regular season. It's kind of feels still in the preseason, but that's coming next on Rise of Seabird. We're back on the Rise of Seabird podcast, the Cardinals talk on the web. Keys to the game. Preseason, number one, no major injuries. And no nagging injuries to the starters. That goes without saying. That's the preseason. You want that happening. Certainly not. But number two, they played a pretty game last week. Pretty clean game last week, that is. Continue with that. We know that the Cardinals overall are probably short on talent compared to the rest of the league overall. Like if you're looking from across the different parts or facets of the game, offense, defense, special teams. Their offensive talent, Kyler Murray gets back in the lineup, is fine. It's fine. It's average to slightly above average overall. The defense is questions, but clean. Avoid penalties. They did that last week, one pre-snap penalty on offense. We want to see that not happen again. Because a disciplined, clean game will keep them in the game. Play kind of mistake-free. I want to see, they do more running the ball. It felt like last week they could have had more success running the ball if they had better runners running it. Like, it felt like there were some plays there, and they did okay. But it felt like last week the performance was they got the yards that were there only and nothing more. And that obviously would change with James Conner in the lineup, I believe. But, do more in the running game. Get some pass rush. We want to see that off the edge. Get some hands on some footballs is kind of the case for there. But that's basically kind of it. So 1, health. 2, mistakes. And then 3, I want to see plays in the run game. I want to see pass rush. And I'd like to see a couple of explosives on offense, a couple of explosive plays to kind of move forward. And with that kind of wraps this up. If this is a short episode, I'm Jess Root. We'll be back. Seth and I will be back next week to talk about the game and more stuff moving forward. This is the episode 452 of the Rise of Seabird podcast. Thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, Sea Red, and of course, rise up, Sea Red.